listening to the House by the Video Store podcast.
There's no more room in hell. The dead will walk here.
We have such sights to show you.
I kick ass for the Lord!
Praise God! Give away!
Welcome to the House by Video Store podcast. I'm your host, William, and joining me today will be Sean.
Hello.
And Derek.
I'm back.
And on this episode, we'll be discussing the 1988 black comedy cult hit, Heathers, which had Winona Ryder and Christian Slater in it. But before we do that, we'll go through recent news and things we've been watching and some recent news. So, Derek, you did not get a chance to be on the last episode when we discussed Alien Covenant, but the box office numbers for that film have not been that great. It debuted to like $36 million in the opening weekend, which was below the expectations of like the low 40s. And Prometheus was in the like 51 million in 2012. So it looks like the movie will fail to make $100 million in the U.S. and worldwide as of May 30th. It currently sits at $160 million. So it's not been a very big hit. And
Been released worldwide, so I don't know if it has many other places that has been released at to make a lot of money, because it's already been out in China and a lot of other places. So it's probably maxed out what it's going to make.
yeah, I think it'll continue to make a little bit more because it, still will make, because it's only been out in theaters, or at least in the U.S. for a couple of weeks, but ultimately it's not going to come close to making what Prometheus did, which was $400 million worldwide, or it was over $400 million worldwide. So I know Ridley Scott talked about making like sequels like for this series for the foreseeable future. I don't know if that will be the path they go down after these box office numbers. So Derek, you didn't get to be on the episode when we recorded it. So without going super deep into spoilers and stuff, like what were your general thoughts and what was your score for that movie?
Well, this will be spoiler free, obviously, and I'm gonna try to keep it short. It was just a really unoriginal, unimaginative film in there that was really like this movie to me was just essentially made for the fans of the film.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to bring in a new audience at all. There's nothing there for a person who has not watched these films to get involved into. It was the second movie that I've seen since we were doing this podcast that I almost walked out on. This being like, I was the point of which I was about to walk out, got back onto the ship. I don't want to give any spoilers away. I will say,
is this like maybe later in the film, like I guess
later in the
third
film
act stuff? Okay.
Yeah, third act.
When they got back onto their ship.
But yeah, right around the third act, I was just like, I'm done with this movie. It's, to me, it was like, honestly, I would much rather just watch Aliens versus Predator.
Ooh.
At least that movie's bad. It's like entertaining in a bad way. Like if it's on TV, I'll watch it. Because back when I used to work in my dad's shop, it just came on FX all the time, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd watch it all the time. It's like, it's bad. There's not much to it, but at least there's like some entertainment to it, like dumb entertainment. It's not high-minded at all. It's like, and this is something that we've talked about off the podcast, is I felt like this was maybe like 2 or 3 movies put together.
Yeah, because I've seen a lot of people when they talk about Alien Covenant, they said it felt like 2 different movies smushed together, and you didn't get enough of either direction. The more like heady sci-fi stuff that Prometheus kind of touched on, and then the more traditional horror sci-fi film that you got out of the original Alien, like Alien 3. So it took kind of those 2 different types of movies, mashed them together, and didn't really give people enough of what they wanted from either. Because I know some people on list that like I ran into actually liked the movie and were talking it up. But I think that the word of mouth and the cinema score and the huge drop in the box office would indicate that people were not fans of the movie overall.
Well, I kind of feel like this is a movie that people who are like film snobs look at and try to act like there's more substance there than there really is, and there's really very little substance there. And they try to make it this like real high-minded, high thought process movie.
And
I wonder if there wasn't we saw this with Prometheus, is that they had a cut out that would have made way more sense, and I wonder if there's stuff like in this film that when it gets released on DVD and there'll be scenes you get to watch, like, well, why did they cut that? Because it makes the movie make sense.
Well, in that thing, that news article about there being like 20 additional minutes that were cut, there was a quote from him talking about, I guess, like pre-screenings and the audience screenings they used to kind of shape the film. And he was talking again about using those and think, okay, maybe this is going too slow. Maybe we need to not explain much here or explain much more here. So it sounds like he was really trying to make this one for the audience and not really for himself at all, in the slightest. So who knows? Maybe those 20 minutes putting those in will make it at least a better film. I'm not saying it's going to make it a stellar film, but then again, you're still going to have a longer movie, which is never like the ideal thing.
No.
Yeah.
I'll say this, and this is not spoilers. This is if you've watched TV in the past month or two or been to the movies, you've seen these scenes. So this is not a spoiler. There are certain scenes where like they're fighting one of the xenomorphs out in the field. You have the backburster from the backburster till David, which is all in the trailers. David shows up, or the hooded figure. Enjoyed that. So that's maybe like
you enjoyed that.
I enjoyed that a lot. Yeah. And to me, that was fun. That was interesting. That was cool scenery. I loved like the flare and just like all that worked really well for me. It was really cool.
Yeah.
And then they went away from that and never got to anything at all that was like that again. And just from that on, like it turned into a completely different film. I feel like that's like one of the marks where it went from, I don't know. It just like, I feel like at certain parts you're just watching different movies.
Well, too, like, so has anybody seen the Red Letter Media video where it's like where is anybody aware of that video series? It's like where the two guys.
I've seen like the Star Wars, they do like Star Wars Episode 1. Was that like one of their early videos?
Yeah, and it's like two guys like sitting on a set that's like looks like a like rundown house, and they're very dry, and they just ask questions about what happened in the movie. And Alien Covenant, they just eviscerate all kinds of points in it, and point out a lot of the inconsistencies between Prometheus and Alien Covenant, and then Alien Covenant and the original Alien, and a lot of other stuff. So I'll put that in the show notes. Like I think that's worth watching once you've seen the movie.
But what I disliked about this movie the most is this movie was not daring. It was not new. There was nothing there to like. Prometheus, for all of its flaws, was a very interesting concept. And it's a movie that I've continued to think about a long time after it's been released. It's been out 5 years now, and I still think about a lot of the concepts from it. And it exactly what kind of score I gave it on the podcast. But at least that movie tried, and it tried to be something different, and it gave you something that maybe it wasn't a perfect film, but it was just like a couple of tweaks away from being a really great film by more of the cut that they released than anything else. Sure, Alien loves to have the dumbest people in the universe in their films. Quit having the stupidest people. Like, you got to cut that out, all right? Like, you can't just have the dumbest people ever in 6 films. You have to at least have a smart crew at some point in there, and they've yet to.
Well, yeah. I mean, too, the series has ultimately been like an incredibly dumb collection of characters and Ripley.
Yeah, and I think this is something I talk about too. And here's where this movie lacks for me. And like for me, now horror works differently for everybody. But for it to be like a horror film, or because this is more of a genre film, it's not technically a horror. It has horror elements, but I would not classify this as a horror film. But it has horrific moments in it. And for those to work, for me, I either have to have some type of emotional connection to that's in those events that adds tension and dread, and you don't want to see bad things happen in them. Or the act itself has to be so horrifying and make you uncomfortable and just like disturbing, or has to disturb you. And it didn't do either of those two things. There was no emotional connection I had with any of the characters in the film. And I'm sorry, like, this is the 6th film in that franchise. Other movies and games that have taken from this that have went off the deeper end, and have crazy scenes in it. So it's like, you go, this is maybe an unfair comparison, but it's like this, you go watch like Resident Evil 7 or go play Resident Evil 4. Well, there's events in that were, and this may have pulled from that some and other stuff, but it's like there's stuff in that is way more disturbing than what was in this and other films that we've watched. And that's where I'm like, at no point did the horror work. The story to me was very bad. I feel like it was a cop-out because he got so much flack. And this was like a movie I feel like that maybe he gave too much thought process to what the fans wanted. Make the movie you want to make.
Yeah, because there were
get a better product.
There were interviews that Ridley Scott gave after the release of Prometheus that outlined a very different film than what Alien Covenant was. And some people said there was like a movie called Alien Awakening that technically would have been like a full movie that came between Prometheus and Alien Covenant. And there's that little like 4-minute or less than 5-minute long short film prequel that they released online that had Noomi Rapace in it and as Elizabeth Shaw with David. They kind of filled out some of the information of what happened between the two movies, but
not really.
It didn't really cover that much. I mean, they cover most of it in the movie, but and they show it happen from it. But like overall, it does feel like Ridley Scott kind of crafted this new movie based on what fan reaction was, and like a lot of people said, like Alien and Aliens, regardless of which one you like more, they both are kind of the best of what they are of like sci-fi horror and then like sci-fi action horror. And you have, Sigourney Weaver is Ripley, one of the most iconic roles of all time. You have some really cool stuff going on there. Even though I said there's a bunch of there's a lot of dumb characters in the series, and those first two films are nowhere near as dumb as they are in Prometheus and Alien Covenant. And
and like Ripley was a good character. You care about her. All the Marines, I think you liked in the second one. You liked a lot of the crew in that first one. Like, Dallas was kind of seemed like he was going to be the lead character for a while.
And Jonesy the cat, and
I think too, I'm all for having strong characters, but you can't do the Final Girl movie. You have to make it because you already know that going into this, and it's like, so that takes the tension out because that certain people are untouchable to an extent.
Yeah. I mean,
they should. Yeah, that'd have been nice if they would have switched it up, because in that first Alien film, you didn't know you were going to get a final girl necessarily.
No.
Being a sci-fi film, you would almost think it would have been a guy, because that's what happens a lot in a lot of sci-fi films. So it was kind of new and exciting then when you found you didn't know which way it was going to go. They should have zigged in this one for sure,
and
because everything else was so similar to kind of the things we've seen before.
Well, and two, like the original Alien wasn't like the role of Ripley was written originally for like a male character, and they ended up casting Sigourney Weaver and making it a female.
Yeah.
So I mean, like even though she ultimately was like the final survivor and she was a female, like it wasn't really like a final girl type thing. Granted, because she was an adult, like a working adult who was part of the crew and stuff like that, and treated equally to everybody else, which is, and like you said, was like a refreshing surprise at the time. And then in the recent movies, you can just tell by the marketing who the person is that's going to be alive at the end, at least one of them. So, if not anybody else. So it gets a little bit predictable. So we'll have to see if they actually follow through.
Telegraphed,
We'll have to see if they go through with any more sequels in this series. I'm not sure if they will based on the box office on this one, but
I want to see them do one more.
Yeah.
I want them to take one more shot just to see. And I hope they decide okay, let's make this last one be the final one before the Alien film. You know what I mean? Like, just close that off, have Ridley do one more, try to get it right again, and then, they can kind of be done with it. Don't try to stretch this anymore.
See, that's where I kind of
past one more.
That's where I kind of disagree, because I feel like I'm gonna compare him to Bryan Singer on something, because like Bryan Singer did good with Days of Future Past,
and terrible
with but he did terrible with Apocalypse. Ridley Scott did terrible with Covenant. Put in somebody else's hands. Give a fresh take. Let somebody else come in.
Yeah, but even though he did, I mean, it's hard making a film. You know what I mean? Like, it's gonna happen. Like, it's very hard to make a home run every time, especially when this is his essentially third Alien film. He's still, I think, a great filmmaker. I mean, it's not like my favorite film of all time, but The Martian, that was a really good movie. Stellar. So, like, he still has it in him. It's just, I think there's just a lot of moving pieces. There's probably a lot of people involved on this. Granted, I know he has a lot of weight to throw around with the direction of it and everything, but I'd like to see him get one more shot, just to have the guy that started it all kind of close this loop and back right up to Alien. Only because I'm not saying I need that, because they've been talking about doing that for so long since Prometheus came out. They kept talking about, we're going to lead right up to Alien. Well, if they have good ideas about at least that makes me feel like they have ideas on how to end it. They may have not known the middle parts. Like, even this changed a lot. It sounds like they know how they want to kind of end up. So I want to see how they end up, because that could be a lot stronger than kind of just this middling movie where it's kind of just the things that are happening in the middle. You can see how Prometheus could be pretty strong and kind of the finale. So I would like to see him do that. He's an older guy. He doesn't have an extra 50 years to make another one, come back and make another one later on like he did with these.
Yeah. So.
Movie history tells us, though, that the third one will be even worse. Very seldom do you have a mediocre first movie, a very, very mediocre second movie, and then a masterpiece in the third. That generally doesn't happen. So right now the money and everything else is trending downward. So I would be surprised that
but it's a weird, like, but then again too, this is sometimes those third ones, people think they don't have places to go. This one actually has kind of a place to go, and it may be worse if it ties, they may not be able to handle it right. But again, like, I didn't like those prequel Star Wars movies, but that third one was kind of cool to see how that wrapped back up. And granted, it didn't back up exactly to it, but to kind of see how things ended up for some characters that you knew about.
Yeah, I mean, we'll just have to see if they make another one of the Alien films, but box office indicates not that much.
You just give a score of the movie.
Oh yeah,
it's a very solid 2 out of 10. I would not recommend this movie to anybody outside of hardcore fans.
Yeah, I mean, it's
a bad movie. It was just bad all around. The story was bad. Horror was bad. The effects in some of the scenes were just god awful, and it's like seems to be a Fox thing. I don't know why they can't.
Well, I think they cheap out
special effects than they have.
I think they cheap out on some of the special effects for some reason, because, like I said, Alien Covenant, the budget was like $97 million, which is less than Prometheus, which I think had better effects. And 5 years prior, it was a little bit bigger budget. So I think on this one they had, like I said on the review, there's like the neomorphs, which are the kind of the backburster aliens. When that alien first hatched, to me, I said it almost felt like that scene from Spaceballs where the alien hatches and then it does the little dance number. Mm-hmm. Like, it almost felt like that. So, but yeah.
And real quick, the entire premise of this is, making the best life form in the universe. And just science tells us that if its gestation period is literally hours and it goes from a baby to an adult in minutes, it probably would have a lifespan of like a day.
Well,
it would die within a day.
Well,
so this entire thing is just stupid.
The creatures themselves don't make a ton of sense based on a lot of things, but like I said,
it's idiot stuff.
I'll post
I'll
post a link to that Red Letter Media video in the show notes. So check that out if you've seen Alien Covenant and you haven't watched that yet. It's pretty funny. But
they don't conform to the rules of science.
Yeah, so that was Alien Covenant. So we finally got Derek's input on that.
So it's in the running for best horror film of the year. Listen for that more at the end of the year for the end of the year podcast. I'm sure that'll make some list, or at least discussion for
something.
Some certain list.
So some other brief news before we move into the movie. Adam Wingard, who directed You're Next and The Guest, will be the director of the upcoming Godzilla vs. King Kong. And he joins another horror director, Michael Daugherty, who directed Trick or Treat, who's going to be directing Godzilla King of the Monsters. So we're seeing a couple of lower budget horror directors get these big franchises, and it's not a necessarily new trend because there have been a lot of movies like the Kong Skull Island was given to a director that only done like an indie film, and that was more of like a comedy or drama or something like that. So you get a lot of directors now who are getting handed huge franchises that haven't had movies with that large of budgets yet. Granted, Adam Wingard just directed Death Note for Netflix, which I think was the largest budgeted thing he had made. But like Kong Skull Island was directed by Jordan Vogt Roberts, who before that had done The Kings of Summer and things like that. And Michael Darks did Trick or Treat and Krampus, and he's doing the other one. So it's an interesting
I hope
trend.
they bring some horror to it. And I don't mean like it has to be straight up like a slasher, but just horror in the same way Steven Spielberg is able to blend kind of the big budget films, with horror elements, like Jurassic Park or something.
Yeah.
Like I hope they're able to bring that right blend of sensibilities to where, you have this spectacle, you have this scope and amazement, but then you also got these, awesomely terrifying scenes that feel in place, that they don't feel out of place in the film or the kind of the world it's built. I'm not saying that's easy to do because Spielberg is somebody who's great at that. And he is, he's obviously one in a billion, but yeah, I'm excited to kind of see what they're doing. Hopefully, I'm not saying maybe it would be cool, but hopefully Adam Wingard doesn't go full found footage like he did with Blair Witch.
Well, I think
hope he wasn't inspired to make another Cloverfield with King of the Monsters, but you could see some cool stuff with that.
or yeah, he's doing Godzilla versus King Kong.
That's right. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see what they're going to do with it, and it is encouraging to see. I mean, granted, Adam Wingard had more of like a track record than some of the indie directors who've been handed big franchises in the past.
He's gotten around. I think he's kind of. I think he probably feels like he's pretty comfortable handling a lot of stuff now.
Because like some of the movies, like it was like a thing in years past where they, like with we discussed Alien 3, David Fincher had done music videos mostly and things like that, and then he got Alien 3, and that was his first big directorial thing, and he got pushed around by the studio and got stuff taken out of his control and things like that. As opposed to now, I think that more studios are giving directors the reins to movies and trusting them to handle it and not coming and stepping in as much. Now, like on the Marvel side, they've gotten some smaller, lesser-known directors to take on big projects, and it seems like they've let them mostly do what they wanted in the films, but at the same time, you have like Edgar Wright, who bounced because their vision didn't match his vision for Ant-Man. So there's interesting stuff, but like as more of these horror directors get into these big projects, hopefully you see some of that horror influence in these movies, which would maybe open the door for studios to be more willing to do big budget horror in and of itself after they see the elements of it work in other movies that do well.
Yeah, like I said, I think Spielberg kind of nails that right amount of blend to have your mainstream audiences not really even, think about it as a horror film, but or is able to put that excitement and fear into audiences. Like, Jurassic Park, like, you don't think, oh, that's a horror film, but I mean, that is like, an awesome horror film. It's got a great setup, and then it's just terror, but it has a lot of lighter moments too. And I think that's kind of, I don't know. It's, like I love the way he handles a lot of his films, and he kind of sneaks so many things in there that you don't realize what he's actually doing.
Yep, and some other brief news. There's a trailer out now for the new project from director Neil Blomkamp. It's an experimental project or series called, I guess the teaser sets for Oats Volume 1, which is, like, if you watch the trailer, it's not very long. It's like a minute and a half, and it has Sigourney Weaver in it. And, of course, Neil Blomkamp, like, he was in the news because he had been rumored to have been working on a new Alien film that took place after Aliens, that maybe disregarded Alien 3 and Resurrection, but that didn't come to pass because Ridley Scott made Alien Covenant and that branch of films. But the trailer is out there. It's interesting. It doesn't really give you a lot of details. It just says it's coming soon. So I'll be interested to see that.
It just looks like the third act of District 9 kind of. It's it's aliens that are designed, they're not the same exact design, but they very much, like, I haven't seen that movie in forever. And if you told me those aliens were in that film, I would say, okay, yeah. Like, I haven't seen it since I saw it in theaters in 2008 or whenever it came out.
I think it was 2009.
2009. So yeah, it really feels like it could have been a scene out of that. Like it's a lot. Yeah, it looks like military action kind of shooting aliens.
Well, too, so supposedly Neil Blomkamp teased he'd be making original experimental short films that'll be able to be purchased. So I'm guessing that this is just the teaser for one of those. So, and two, he had a bunch of commercials and like short films he released before he started making movies like District 9. And then he did a bunch of the live action Halo ads for one of those games that were on TV. And they had him online and stuff years back because he was originally supposed to work on a Halo movie before that fell apart. So I'll be interested to see this stuff because I know that people weren't big on Elysium and Chappie, but if this is more short stuff, then maybe he'll be able to get back into a groove and get some projects off the ground that people are interested in. And so there was that news. And then
Resident Evil.
Yeah, they're going to reboot that franchise.
With James Wan producing, so I think that's going to be an interesting take. At least it's probably going to be more horror focused if he's producing. You would assume.
If they get back to the more, the source material stuff and get away from the action horror, whatever the Paul W.S. Anderson stuff was, I think I'd be pretty interested in it.
Yeah, I'm interested to see them kind of do another take on that series. With just because that other one was so long lasting. Yeah, it just was so far away from the games, and even if it's not the exact same characters, you just kind of want that. I don't know. I mean, I do like the iconic stuff like Raccoon City and all that, but just kind of the way some of the story unfolded in those games and the dread and they were really good about atmosphere and quiet moments and stuff. So yeah, I really hope they just make a straight horror film, Resident Evil.
Yeah, I mean, and hopefully they don't fall so the original Resident Evil films were more like sci-fi horror than they were like straight up zombie films or horror films. And hopefully they don't go in the other direction and want to make a melodramatic Walking Dead type shtick type thing with it.
Yeah.
So, but it'll be interesting to see what they do with it because the box office for the other films that kind of tapered off this last one, and they were never huge hits in the U.S. They just made decent money worldwide. So it'll be like with the surge in popularity of zombie type stuff. Granted, that may be on the way out. Who knows? But hopefully, when they do the franchise this time, they do something where it doesn't like in the movies. Whenever characters from the game showed up, like Claire Redfield or Chris or like that, it always felt like goofy fan service, and it looked goofy.
Yeah.
It reminded me when there was video game magazines I had back in the day when I was younger, back before the Mortal Kombat movie was made. I remember there was like pictures of people like dressed like the Mortal Kombat characters that were in some of those strategy guides or different things in those game magazines. And they look super cheesy, and that's what those Resident Evil movies remind me of when the actual characters showed up, like Jill and stuff like that in the movies.
Yeah,
so
they
hopefully
look like they were straight out from that opening FMV on the first game.
Yeah. So hopefully in these if they relaunch everything and they want to bring in those characters from the games, they don't go for the look of the games because those were not realistic looks to begin with in the 90s when they came out. And if you just try to stick to that, it just kind of looks goofy. If you're trying to shoehorn all the characters in, that can hurt the overall product. But just go for the feeling of the original games more so than the story, because they've appeared on screen before now. All the characters pretty much.
Like I said, the thing I love about it is kind of that small town feel of something bad happening in a small town, and it's almost like a little contained secret because it is some small Midwestern town that feels like it's just a little corner of the world, and it's almost like something could be happening there and you not be aware of it just because it is like this just little town,
Yeah.
So I hope that would be great. Like just have like a Twin Peaks, but with zombies, like where it feels like a community and a small town and it doesn't have to be a globe-trotting thing or people going across the country like The Walking Dead,
Well, too, I just always, out of a Resident Evil movie, what I wanted was the opening section out of the original Dawn of the Dead with the SWAT team and the police officers going into like that building. Like I wanted something like that felt like it was in a city. And that just never really got delivered by any of the Resident Evil movies. So.
I mean, I don't know. I would just love to see him just have one set in the Spencer Mansion, but to me, what would make it a better movie is like when you play the video game. Well, their Scissors game came out in '96, so I mean it's 21 years old now. But like the reason why they go to the mansion is because like people in the town were being killed by the zombies.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to almost see like, and this is different, but I would love to see more like a True Detective style, like movie that's based off of like investigating those murders and like horrific stuff from that leads into the Spencer Mansion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think if you did more of a grounded, gritty approach, that would be pretty interesting to see. And that way, if you do have Chris Redfield and any of the Stars members like Jill Valentine or anything, you have them leading, but in a way where it feels more like a real world and not just like William said, like a lot of times where it just feel like fan service,
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So we'll keep up on that as more news comes out, or if there is more news on the Resident Evil reboot. I think the last bit of news was the new Conjuring film, the third one. They had mentioned that it wouldn't be just a haunted house film like the prior ones. And I wonder too, think that's shaped by that lawsuit that's going on for like $1 billion against Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
Where they were being sued over supposedly taking elements from a book that an author written with Ed and Lorraine Warren, who supposedly had like the rights to the film. And then Warner Brothers is saying they're just adapting true life stories, so there's no rights issue. So,
well, let me tell you something about Ed and Lorraine Warren. All their stuff, crap. Like, go do any investigation on that stuff, and like a lot of the books that they had, like the most popular cases of theirs, they didn't hire like, I can't think of the right word or the right type, but like the authors that they hired they were all fiction writers. They weren't nonfiction.
Well, yeah, because the writer of that book is now claiming it was a work of fiction, not nonfiction, which is why.
Because he was always a fiction writer. He had never written like anything based in the real world. It was all fantasy type stuff. God, why would you hire Stephen King to write a real world story when he's not known for that? You know what I'm saying?
Like, he's going to spice it up a little bit.
Like, and if you go know anything about the Amityville horror stuff, like it was all the attorney's idea over like a bottle of wine with the people that own the house, and then so you look at all this stuff and like the most popular cases they have made up, so it's hard to base stuff off of the truth when you hire a fiction writer that writes stuff like that, like a horror writer, I think is what he was. So hire that guy, and it's like, of course you're gonna get an embellishment because that's what he does.
Well, I mean,
that's what he's hired to do.
I mean, when they're sitting down telling a story and you amp up elements dramatically, things like that. So yeah, I mean, the Conjuring films, like I think like the second one we were not super high on. I mean, it wasn't a bad movie by any means. It was still enjoyable. It was a little bit long, but
I think they're both well made, and I understand the craft behind them. They just don't do it much for me, like emotionally, or like, to kind of, they don't get my blood pumping or anything like that. Like, I don't really ever care about the haunted house stories anymore. Like, I've seen it enough,
and two, that Ed and Lorraine Warren lived past any of the stories that'll be in these movies. And that nobody involved in their major cases died, or else there would be more said about that.
Yeah.
So the stakes are relatively low, and they just have to embellish up the horror aspects or the ghost aspects. So it would be interested to see what they do with this new one in wake of this lawsuit, like if that affects anything. But at least they're not going to be doing the same thing for a third film in a row, hopefully.
I mean, immediately hearing that, I'm way more excited for that third film than I would have been.
Yep, so I think that was all the news. So now I can move into the discussion of what we've been watching. And Sean and I did a Twin Peaks video on the first 4 episodes of that series that you can go watch, that's out now. It's about 50 minutes long. We discussed the first 4 episodes, missed a lot of stuff, I'm sure, got stuff wrong, as we were pointed out in the comments.
No errors at all.
But the first 4 episodes of that show, we won't go into too much in that here then, since that separate video is out. But go check that out.
Yeah. Very good stuff. Love what Lynch and Frost are doing. That was kind of more the point of the video. It wasn't an analysis or breakdown. Like, we couldn't even remember basic plot stuff because, it's like watched them all off. Watched them all four at once. It's like 4 hours of this like trippiest stuff you've seen on TV. And so it's like
watch just watch 4 hours of TV and try to turn around and talk about it within 24 hours and see how much you can remember without taking extensive notes.
Yeah. And I hadn't read much about impressions or anything like that. So
yeah, Derek, you'll need to watch those 4 episodes without having watched the original series and just tell us what you think.
All right, I'll try to do it.
I'm sure that you will get as much enjoyment out of that as you did Alien Covenant.
Yeah. So we'll do a weekly update on that. Of course, we did the first 4 all at once because they were online, so there's none this week. Yeah. But those have been getting major hits on our YouTube page. So, and we already kind of have planned on doing that anyway, just because we like that series a lot. And
there's gonna be a lot to unpack since it goes on for 18 episodes.
Unless it was total like dog crap. Yeah. We probably would have been like, oh, well, we're just not going to do a weekly thing. We'll just talk about it on the podcast. But there is a lot to talk about with that series. So it'll be much easier to talk about one episode at a time also.
Yep. So you can check that out. I didn't really have time to watch much else because we're actually recording this a day late. And the episode's coming out on Wednesday instead of Tuesday this week because we had the Memorial Day holiday and things going on that caused timing issues and I had some PC problems. So I didn't really have a chance to watch anything else. And I had problems with my personal computer, not political correctness.
It's funny though when you said PC problems, since we're recording this online, it glitched out and you had a robotic voice. It's like PC problems. Derek, do you watch anything?
I mean, no, because I had to do some recertification stuff for work all week. So
how's that going? I saw you posting pictures of brake jobs and stuff.
Yeah, I got all that done. I have to do tests every 5 years, and I got all that done. The only thing I did watch was I bought Logan and rewatched it.
You said, did you watch the black and white version?
Oh, the black and white version. I loved it. Like I know it's gimmicky, but
see, I didn't get the Mad Max one. I wanted to, but I had already had the Blu-ray, and I was like, that looks kind of cool, but I don't know. I love the color in that. But the Logan, the stuff I saw from that looked awesome, and I was like, I think it probably fits that movie a lot more.
And that was the one thing is me and Courtney watched it, and she was telling me how well it suited that film because she loves all the classic noir films anyway. They call it the Logan noir version, but
yeah, I actually was looking up to see if there's screenings here because they screened it one night in certain theaters, I think like right before the DVD came out or Blu-ray, but they didn't have it anywhere around here because Nicole didn't see it, and I'm halfway thinking about just showing her that version.
Yeah, if you haven't, it's because when I bought the Blu-ray, I pre-ordered it. I think they all come with it anyway. You don't have to buy a separate one. Mine just came with like the DVD, the Blu-ray, and the Blu-ray black and white version.
Yeah,
cool. Highly recommend it because it's pretty different experience.
Yeah. I just watched do what?
I said it's pretty different experience just visually anyway.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there was some striking scenes in black and white from what I saw, like out in the field, kind of like an aerial shot and stuff like that. It seems like almost like that film was lit for black and white also. That's the same way they were lit like Raiders of the Lost Ark, that DP. I think he was used to working in black and white. So I think I've talked about this before, but there's a cutout there just in black and white with all the dialogue taken out. And then just some Trent Reznor I think Trent Reznor, just music underneath of it that Steven Soderbergh did. And it's awesome because it lets you just watch the film visually. I just watched kind of the basic stuff, Silicon Valley, Veep, which is still stellar. A little bit of Kimmy Schmidt. And I'm only mentioning this because you guys love Arrested Development, but David Cross, he showed up in season 2. And this one, he had an awesome pratfall, which he's awesome at that, down some stairs. And then we got in some more Arrow videos, and we got in a movie called Evil Ed. Have you guys ever heard of that?
Yes, I have heard of that.
I'd kind of heard of it, but had no clue what it was, actually. Sorry. Can you guys hear my notifications going off?
No.
Okay, good. I don't know what the heck that is. So it is a Swedish film. It was made in 1995. The The concept is basically there's an editor that works for like a movie studio. It's supposed to be set in the United States though. He works for a movie studio and they have their, I don't know what they call it, but essentially like their horror department or their horror branch. And because of their European distribution deals, which is essentially like the video nasties thing, you know, how they bring up that there's regulations where they can't show nudity or violence or stuff like that. They have to cut all that stuff out of all their films. So he gets relegated to cutting all that stuff out. But in doing that, it kind of starts driving him crazy. And he starts like, it's almost like, say like I'm trying to think what movies those are in, but in a movie where the hero sees somebody and he thinks they're like a zombie or a demon or something, but they're actually normal. Anyway, he starts seeing people around him and he thinks they're demons and stuff he's seen from these movies because there's something that's told him that they are the evil of the world and he has to kind of take them out. So that's the concept, which I think is a really cool setup, really awesome. And the transfer looks great, like they always do. There's actually 3 discs, and the third one I kind of want to check out because it has like a 3-hour making of, and it looks pretty good. Like they are definitely fans of Evil Dead. The director, or I think it's the director or maybe the head of that department, his name is Sam Campbell, and Evil Ed is obviously like a play on words of the Evil Dead, and I was also thinking it was kind of like Evil Editor as well, but there's a lot of Sam Raimi-esque style shots and stuff like that in it. But the bad thing is once that setup comes, it's pretty much you're just watching him kill people. Like there's nothing pushing the story forward. You know, there's not another side to it trying to figure out who's doing it or anything like that. So it gets pretty boring. Granted, I think I watched the special edition. Let me see here. I have my paper. Yeah, I don't know where it's at. I think I watched the slightly longer version, so I don't know if they put in just more kills and stuff. I don't know if some things were edited because in Sweden, this was made as a protest to the rules and regulations of that time also. And it's kind of weird, though, that this was made in protest just because it's almost like maybe it's supposed to point to the absurdity of thinking this is possible. But it's like in this film, actually, somebody does go crazy watching horror films. But yeah, it just gets way too boring. Again, they have some pretty cool visuals, some cool creature designs and stuff like that, or makeup designs and stuff. The end of it's all right. It's nothing stellar. It's not like there's any like weird twist or anything like that. It's pretty straightforward. It is a cool idea. Like I said, it does seem like it's made by big horror fans. Like there's horror movie posters everywhere in the film because they do work in a studio. And they're always throwing out lines from like his wife's name's Barbara, and he says, "I'm coming to get you, Barbara." You know, the line from Blue Velvet, "Don't you fucking look at me," or whatever. He says that like twice for some reason. There's just a bunch of stuff like that in here. So it is really seems like a movie made by fans, and it's pretty well executed. It's just they seemingly were only interested in a lot of the gore and kills and being kind of celebrating a lot of the slasher films and stuff like that. So I don't recommend blind buying this at all. But if you can watch it, maybe put it on. But honestly, Nicole and I were both kind of checked out once it got past that first act, or once things start happening after about the second kill. We were checked out until about the end because it was just a lot of the same thing over and over and over, which is a shame because it's a great concept. I think it will be a kind of a cool remake, but at the same time, some of this is about him actually editing the films, and editing is not as visual as it used to be now that it's all on the computer, because, when you're actually editing film, you're actually getting to see people. It's a physical process. So it's much more visual. Now it will just be somebody clicking around on the computer, which is not as interesting, but yeah, it was all right. If you're a fan of it already, I would say definitely get this. I think it's like $26 or somewhere around there on Amazon. And it's got 3 discs. It's got the original version, the special edition, and then another disc with, I think, maybe another version, but I know it's got like a bunch of bonus features and stuff because Arrow always packs their stuff full. So if you're a fan of it, maybe pick it up if you've been waiting for a new release, but I definitely don't think it's a blind buy if you've never seen it. And you're not, if you're just looking for that type of film and you're fine if you love films or you just see a lot of kills and stuff, then absolutely go for it, because this is at least done with a little bit more style and better execution than some of those kind of low end slashers of the 80s and stuff like that. And I think that was pretty much it, aside from watching Twin Peaks and then Heathers.
All right, so now I can move into our discussion of Heathers, the 1988 film that's kind of like a cult hit black comedy. It starred Winona Ryder, Christian Slater, and Shannon Doherty, and it was directed by Michael Lehman, who also directed what was it? Hudson Hawk, I believe, which was that movie that had Bruce Willis that didn't do too well, and Airheads, which was like the movie that had Adam Sandler and Brendan Fraser and all those people in it.
Steve Buscemi. I liked that movie a lot when I was younger.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, it used to be on Comedy Central like every day.
Yeah, they played it a lot. They had Chris Farley in it, Michael McKean, Judd Nelson, so a bunch of people that you would recognize. It just wasn't the big hit that some of the other like Adam Sandler movies were later. But yeah, so that was from the same director as Heathers, and this was a movie that, and two, I guess we'll be doing spoilers throughout the review, because it's a movie that you should check out. It's on Netflix now, so that's how I think all of us watched it, so you can watch it there if you want. And it's a movie that came out in '88, and something, I'd recommend checking out just because it's, kind of a cult hit. It's been out for a long time. And I think it's more relevant now with stuff like 13 Reasons Why being popular on Netflix and being about like teenagers and suicide and stuff. And this was a movie from a very, very different era that handled it much differently, that I think is worth checking out. And two, it's got the thing where at the time that movie was made, Winona Ryder was like a teenager. She wasn't like a 30-year-old. Like a lot of movies, because the movie came out in '88 and she's born in '71, so she was a teenager when the movie came out, and not like the '80s slashers where you have somebody that's supposed to be playing a teenager that's got like a receding hairline and arms that are hairier than my legs. Like
there was some older teenagers in this movie, though.
I mean throughout
it's
it
not
though,
immune to that, yeah.
But the leads at least look young, and then because there were other people in contention for the movie that turned it down because their parents didn't like it or something like that because they were young. So, yeah, I mean, like Winona Ryder herself was young, but not everybody in the movie was. But overall, yeah, so it's basically, just to give you the overview of it, according to IMDb, the synopsis is that in order to get out of the snobby clique that is destroying her good girl reputation, an intelligent team teams up with a dark sociopath in a plot to kill the cool kids. And the movie it's an hour and 43 minutes, so it's not super long either. And it came out in the 80s, so you had like the John Hughes type high school movies like Breakfast Club and stuff like that. And this stands in pretty stark contrast to those. And then it has moments of humor, but it's also like two characters are killing their classmates and making it look like suicide. And then there's a lot of humor that comes out of that and things like that. And
I told my wife, because she had never seen it, and I was like, it's a bit like Mean Girls from the late 80s, only it goes much further and darker. But it's very much about kind of, I guess certain expectations or maybe cliques or personalities in schools and stuff.
Yeah, the overarching things to take away from it, it just showed how. And two, it's funny how little things change overall, even though technology and everything has caused, more venues for things to happen. Like, there's always been the cliques of like the cool kids and the uncool kids and bullying and things like that. And this movie is very 80s, in late 80s. So the fashion, all that stuff gives away right off the bat. But the movie itself, like this is before cell phones, this is before Facebook, any of that stuff. So it's interesting to see, just the dark humor aspects to it too, because the thing that I always remembered about this movie was when the two football players get killed, and it's so funny. Christian Slater leaves the package of gay material that the cops find, and then their like suicide note, and it was like, what, like bottled water and something like.
Yeah, well, it's mineral water.
Mineral water.
And that's what they say. Yeah, you're drinking that. No, you're not drinking a beer in Ohio. You might as well be.
So you have like.
It's a very weird thing because on one hand you think, okay, this has some very dated, I guess, they take being gay as like a derogatory thing, or you know what I mean? Like that's like a bad thing for them to have died as, or it's the absurdity of the football players thinking it's the worst thing that they could be, because they make that one kid say, say whatever, like say you're gay or whatever. Remember they're holding him down like after.
Yeah, and they make him talk about wanting cocks or something.
Yeah, so part of me was like, okay, well, maybe they're trying to show that these guys are butt of the joke, so they're the meatheads, and that's why they think that it's an issue. But then again, like Christian Slater frames them for basically being gay. So it's like maybe that isn't the point of this. But Christian Slater's character also is not somebody to look up to in this film. So it's hard to see where the screenwriters stood on that, but it's definitely something that probably would be handled much differently today, regardless.
Yeah. It is funny because, like, one thing I didn't, and this is the dark humor part of the movie, but like every time they killed somebody and faked their suicide, it just made them more popular.
Yeah,
like the fact that the two jocks, they made him look gay, it just gave him depth. And made everybody think of them.
And everybody seemed like not a one-dimensional character, when the school is basically full of one-dimensional characters who are exactly what you thought they were, almost, like the jocks, the preppy people, I guess like the nerds or whatever. But yeah, everybody was as shallow as they seemed. But
when the
dimension.
The girl that they tried to make, they set up to get embarrassed at the beginning of the film, when she actually tries to commit suicide, ends up living. It was no longer cool to commit suicide anymore because she did it. So it just like, just how true, not just the suicide, but just like how that really works. Just always, I guess, when somebody that's deemed not popular does something, it's not cool anymore.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
it's funny, like when she did it, she had legitimate reasons, and then it just, it's not cool to do anymore.
Well, then she failed. She failed at it too, which gave them more like ammunition to make fun. And it just showed you like the characters in the movie, like the Heathers themselves. So you had the three Heathers that were friends with Veronica, who was Winona Ryder's character, and they were kind of like the most popular girls in school, but they were terrible people. And like they did stuff like give a fake note to that girl that was from one of the jocks, and then just did stuff that made the common students' lives, the less popular students' lives, like terrible. And you just saw the very cliquish type stuff in that school. And Christian Slater's character was kind of the outsider who, I guess in and of his own right, was like seen as somewhat cool, but he wasn't part of the clique. And he did things like when the jocks picked on him, he pulled a gun out and shot it at them, but it had blanks in it.
Yeah, that's another thing.
Hold up. Yeah, so in that movie, he didn't get like arrested or like kicked out of the school. He just got like in a little bit of trouble. And that was in '88, before Columbine and all the school shootings and the school violence skyrocketed and things like that. So that's another thing that kind of dates the movie, because if you did that in today's age, you're in prison probably.
Oh yeah, you'd be in quite a bit of trouble. Or you at least, if you didn't end up in prison, you would definitely most likely be expelled and go through a bunch of legal proceedings before you're allowed even back into school, if you were ever allowed back in.
Yeah, and because I remember watching that for the first time, because I'd seen the movie on TV here and there, then it was on Netflix and I watched it there. And it's funny when you look at the movie on IMDb, it shows like other movies like people who like this also liked. So they have like 16 Candles and The Breakfast Club and Pretty in Pink and Clueless and other stuff. So it's funny that it'll be lumped in with some of those movies, despite the fact.
Yeah, but it seems like it's closer to that movie than it is a lot of things. Just because I feel like it very much is about high school life from that era. It may be like the darkest one out of all those, but it's definitely in that same vein.
The Breakfast Club was from a couple years prior, from '85, and it was rated R2. So I think it probably has more in common with that than like a slasher or any type of horror film. And this is a movie too, where over the years, I know when Winona Ryder has talked about there being a sequel or something, and there's like talk of like a TV series at some point. I think that I don't think any of us ever like. And I think like the director or the writer Daniel Waters, one of them had said that when like there was nothing in the works, and Winona just talked about it before, despite there not really being any progress on it. And it's one of those things where, like we said, there's a few elements in it alone that I think would prevent you from able to do like a straight remake of this today. Because suicide is, I mean, I think they were, it was it's been a serious topic always, but it's far more serious now than I think it was treated as in the late 80s.
Yeah, I mean, even though, I think it does treat it seriously in some regard. I think it kind of criticizes those who maybe don't take it seriously enough in the film, because it does, like, everybody who uses it to their advantage, or you know what I mean? Like, it really kind of pulls those people out. Shannon Daughtery, who's like always on TV, like she's like, how many news stations did she run to? Or the teacher's not taking it seriously enough, or some of them trying to use it to their advantage as well. So I think it does. I think it just doesn't do it in a straightforward way to where some people may not think that it is at all sincere, or maybe they might not think the director or writers or those involved maybe they don't see it as a problem necessarily, but I think they truly do. It's just they were able to kind of take this tone with it at the time because maybe it wasn't maybe as prevalent. I don't know the statistics at all, but you would assume that I would be very interested to see if the writer or director or anybody involved on a creative level had any experiences with suicide, as far as family members or anything like that. I would really like to dig into the behind the scenes on this for sure, but you would think that would come from a place of experience, even if it wasn't them directly. Maybe somebody, in their school or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, and two, so like another element to this, you have the performances. So you have people like with Christian Slater. I know that, like they said, one of the actors who was up for the role of the Christian Slater got of JD was Brad Pitt. They thought he was too nice, so it didn't really work. Like Christian Slater, this role is pretty perfect for him because he has kind of that like, like the thing where he just comes across as unbalanced and
yes, yeah,
and like. He's doing the classic, like, he, rides the motorcycle. He's kind of the outsider. He smokes, like all these things that make sense in the context and like, or, tropes you see in a lot of those types of movies. And the kills are pretty interesting because they have like, similar to these shoot and kills people, like when he tricks Veronica into killing the jock because, or tricks her into going along with the plan because he says he has like tranquilizer gun bullets that look like real bullets, so that when you shoot it off, it would.
Well, no, they're. I think they were real bullets. They were just essentially like.
Well, he told her that,
they
but
would
he
leave like a flesh wound or something. Yeah.
Well, I think he said like real bullets, but that's what he claimed. But it was actually just real bullets. So when they went and did that, it actually killed the jocks. And then like with the one of the Heathers, they. Put stuff in her drink that was poison that killed her.
Drano, essentially.
Yeah. So then, so they had these different ways they kill people, and then they would just make it look like suicide. Which, like we said, that there was the unintended comedy of like everybody became deep and meaningful in their suicide and became like humanized, and like the jocks, like at their funeral, the dad was like, "I don't care if my son was gay."
Yeah.
And then like JD made the very good point of like, I'm sure he wouldn't be singing that same tune if he had a live son who was gay, which
yeah.
So you had like things like that got made, and then you had some of the absurdist, more comedic stuff like the croquet match stuff at the beginning, and then like the kind of dream sequences you had with Veronica where she just dreamed about things that happened, and it had some similar had somebody in there from Beetlejuice too, because I was kind of getting like a Beetlejuice vibe from it.
It was the priest.
Yeah, the priest was in Beetlejuice too. So I was kind of getting like a little bit of a vibe of Beetlejuice, kind of with the music choices and the fact it had Winona Ryder at some point. But different type of movie that was also darker as well, and it was from like an era like like I said, a lot of this stuff, like the nostalgia stuff, like Stranger Things and all the things that are popular, you would think something like this can make a comeback. Like I think it's been popular, and like I'm reading up on the results, it didn't make a ton of money at the box office, but it was popular in home video and has grown a cult following over the years because it was made for 1.1 million and at the box office, or no, it was made for 3 million, and at the box office it grossed 1.1 million, so made less than it cost to make. But over the years on video, it had been, grew over time and became popular and made money.
I had a couple friends, a couple people we went to high school with that were kind of obsessed. They were huge fans of this movie and they quoted it all the time. It was a couple girls. And after I had watched it, I was like, I think it's a good movie. I was like, maybe not as good as I was expecting just based on their reaction to it,
Yeah.
But even now, watching it now, after it's been a little bit more time too, I actually I like it a lot better now than I even did the first time I watched it, which I've seen it since then also, but just, bits and pieces here and there. But and the first time I didn't kind of totally connect. Like I love the dark humor parts of it. But honestly, now that I'm older, I'm kind of wondering, did they also connect to it so much because they were females and, maybe they did deal with actual depression at times, or, you know what I mean? Like maybe there were some really true elements that they kind of related to in this film, or things they may have, experienced, or even just pressures of maybe popularity, if that was something they were worried about. So I think it does a lot. I think this film like covers a lot of bases. And now I think there's even more depth to it than I was probably originally perceiving, just because I'm kind of thinking of more in their shoes and not just thinking of it as a film of me just watching it and being like, it's really funny, it's really good, but it's not, this isn't like one of my top comedies of all time. But there's so many layers to it and so many things it tackles in every scene and so many ways to look at things that I do think it is, I see why it has a cult following. Absolutely.
And two, it touches on other things too, like kind of slut shaming, because the jocks like tell the story about Veronica giving like oral sex and stuff, and then that makes it relevant too. And like like I said, stuff like 13 Reasons Why, that Netflix series that got a lot of flack for its depiction of teenage suicide. So I think the movie covered a lot of stuff that's even relevant today, and like you said, makes it more than just a goofy comedy or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Derek, did you have anything to add on that?
No, I mean, I think y'all covered it pretty good. But, the one thing is, it's this, and y'all kind of covered this too, but it's like, this is the type of movie that, like, the 80s nostalgia that people crave. And this movie is, like, full of it. So it would kind of make sense if they got to pick up, because this is what, like, Stranger Things wants to be. It wants to have that vibe that this movie has. That's kind of why people love Stranger Things. And you look at like the movie I watched, Beyond the Gates. I have this type of nostalgia, but it wanted to feel like this, and it just missed the mark. But yeah, there's just such a, and maybe 290s. This is an 88, so it's almost the 90s too. But you would think that this movie would have a bigger following, because it's just there's so many things now that try to capture what this movie was or what it had.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely the black comedy aspects of it are kind of what make this stand out and have a kind of a different identity also than like any John Hughes films from the 80s and stuff like that.
Hughes films typically had, I'm not gonna say this movie didn't have any lessons in it, but like there's usually something you get out of a John. It's usually like a feel good thing on John Hughes at the end, which is fine because John Hughes put out a lot of good films. But it just, this one is a little bit different because doesn't Christian Slater's get blown up at the end? I can't remember if he blows. He blows himself up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So things just kind of goes back, which in like real life, there's so much that would go on in reality with that.
Yeah,
but,
this is like more of a satire than just kind of a straightforward like teen dramedy or something like that, like a John Hughes film.
It just is funny watching this, living in the world that we live in now. When you watch, it's like, oh, this would be so much different now, especially with like the school bomb and the blowing. It's like it's just funny seeing like how much of a different world we live in today. So
Yeah.
it's like if they did remake this movie, it would be so vastly different. I don't think I'd even want them to do it.
Well, and two, like I think maybe there are some towns, but like our school, it wasn't cliquey in the same way. Like I don't know if those barriers exist the same way that they used to, if they even did everywhere. You know, maybe it is just pockets of the United States, but like in our school, it's like we all went to the same high school. I didn't, you know, I don't feel like any one group was any more popular. Like nobody gave a crap about anybody being quote unquote popular, more popular than anybody else. It was just like everybody was just there. Everybody kind of worried about having their own friends, and nobody gave a crap about people being nerdy or whatever. Like, you know, you may have made fun of people. Like people, of course, got made fun of a little bit, but it wasn't like, you know, a massive group of people would pick on another like smaller subset of people or something like that. Like it was different than it's depicted in a lot of films. And I don't know if that's times changing in the early 2000s or if it's just kind of basically the community we grew up in. I don't know, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think too a lot of the teen movies set in high schools depict things in certain ways that may or may not be accurate. And especially too, like a lot of times it's probably through the experience of whoever the writers are in terms of what's coming through on screen. But like, because like I said, from high school, I don't remember there being specific parallels to these types of characters. I know there was like popular people, and they were generally pretty nice from what I remember.
Yeah, the most popular people were also often popular because sometimes they were good people, you know what I mean, or seemingly good people. They at least treated people well, so therefore they were popular. You know. Now
there may have been
people just were friends with them.
There may have been some behind the scenes stuff I wasn't privy to that would change that opinion, but nothing that ever affected me.
Yeah, and that was totally fine because, like, hey, as long as you're not, you know, crapping on anybody or picking on them too much or whatever, if you're acting like a decent human being, then that's totally fine.
Yeah, I mean, too, like the high school, so we're all in Louisville, Kentucky. I went to the same high school. Derek did not go there during the same time that Sean and I did. He went there after we had graduated because he was younger. But the school had a more than 1,000 people. Because the graduating class alone was like 400 to 500.
Yeah.
2,000.
Yeah, so it was a pretty big school. It had about 2,000 students. So
yeah,
like
that may have helped it too. Just there's so much diversity.
Well, and two, there could have been more clicky stuff that we just weren't aware of because it was in pockets that weren't really relevant to us. But yeah,
that's what I mean. Like there was cliques, but it wasn't like there was a certain people that are outcasts and had no place to go. Like people just had friends. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there may have been some people that only had a couple friends, but it wasn't like there was like a group to be cool with and then that was it or something. You know, it was, and it was a big football school. Like, but I don't know if there's some smaller communities where all they have is football and the school only has, you know, 400 students total, or, you know, I don't know if that still kind of exists in the same way. Cause I've heard other people talk about it before too, that outside of Louisville saying that, no, our schools wasn't cliquey like the traditional, you know, high school comedies are or whatever. So if anybody's listening, I'd like to hear if your schools were and when you went to high school and how it was for you.
I mean, too, like at the school we went to, they had like football, baseball, basketball. All the teams were relatively good. And so like, no, I do remember players on the football team just straight up getting away with stuff. Like, I was in the restroom once and some dude was smoking a joint who was on the football team, and then one of the security guards came in and caught him with it and just made him put it out. And then I think the security guard took his like his unused joint and made him throw away the one that he was in the middle of. And I was like, well, that's interesting. And then that, like, I don't want to name names, but that guy then went on to play in college football and got kicked off a team for pot. So maybe it'd been good to have gotten some discipline when he was younger.
Yeah, he wasn't helping him out at all. Yeah, I mean, they obviously got, you know, there was people that got preferential treatment, but on a student level, you know, some people screwed with the football players. You know what I mean? More than they schooled with the quote unquote nerds. Like, you know what I mean? Like, some of my friends, they would just, you know, be jerks to everybody, certain people I knew. So, you know, there wasn't a specific target, but I like the surrealist quality of this film too. You know, like kind of the colored lighting and yeah, the dream sequence at the beginning and stuff. It just kind of that whole thing too, that it isn't kind of this stark reality is I think you're able to digest some of the dark humor easier. And because it is such a kind of a heavy subject, like, you know, you mentioned Beetlejuice and stuff like that. And, you know, this makes Beetlejuice seem like Teletubbies for the most part, as far as like how dark it is. Like people die of Beetlejuice, but this is teen suicide. You know what I mean? Like there's things, you know, I don't say there's things darker than this, but this is one of the darkest things on the spectrum, I think. So, you know what I mean? Like it's a serious problem. It's seemingly, you know, a preventable thing, or at least it's not like a disease you get or something like that. Like, you know, this is a huge, devastating thing. And it is like kind of a very much more prevalent than it should be all over. So this is about one of the darkest subjects I think you can tackle on film, and they managed to balance it in such a good way. And like I said, satirize it, many different elements of it, and kind of a lot of the people surrounding it. Like and that's what makes it so enjoyable. Kind of just the approach to it. I think it's like such a good movie. It kind of also reminds me of Welcome to the Dollhouse. Have you guys ever seen that?
No, I'm aware of it though.
Yeah, that's from 95. Yeah, 95. That one is also, there's some pretty dark stuff in that as well. And that's kind of follows a, let's see here. Yeah, like a seventh grader. And there's older students involved in that too and stuff like that. But there's some also dark things in that, but it also has this kind of light tone about it. You know, you might think of it as being something more like a Napoleon Dynamite. But yeah, that's a great movie as well. You guys should check that out at some point. I don't know if it's ever been on streaming, but yeah, I like this film a lot. You know, John Hughes films are some of my favorites, and this isn't one I watched as much as his, but I think much like John Hughes films, they got the casting really right. Winona Ryder and Christian Slater, just, you know, they nail it, I think, in this film, and they are perfect casting. And I think that's really kind of what helps carry it. And also too, the supporting cast is awesome as well, and really funny and great. But yeah, I just, you know, also I love Winona Ryder. You know, my wife was like, "Oh, it's a good movie." I'm like, "Well, any movie with Winona Ryder is like automatically 8 out of 10 for me." You know, so but no, I think she does great in this because I don't know, she has just kind of the right personality. Because yeah, she's maybe not placed in the most dramatic roles as being the most dramatic actor or whatever, but like she just has this, I don't know, she's just the right casting for this. There's no other way to say it. Like she was just kind of the perfect actress to kind of bring the things she brought to this role, and kind of were able to play it light and play it fun. And just, you know, yeah, she was awesome. And Christian Slater too, just kind of hams it up a little bit as well, but in all the right ways. And it keeps that surrealist quality and that kind of light, but also very dark tone to the film.
Yeah, so I guess we can move into our review or ratings and what we rate this out of 10. So I guess we can start with, so Derek, what would you give this out of 10?
I mean, it's one of the movies I really enjoy watching it. I could probably watch it. It's a great movie to sit down and watch. It's also like a great movie if you just have it on the background, because I've seen it a lot now. One of those films, like every time I watch it, I'm always engaged and I don't really get bored. All vibe of it. And, you know, it definitely has that big 80s nostalgia to it that a lot of people want. And like you said, Winona Ryder's in it, and she, especially in this point in time, there's been like, she was doing a lot of stuff around this time, you know, and I love all that stuff. So I gotta go with I gotta give it a 7 out of 10.
All right, so 7 out of 10. So Sean, what would you give this?
Yeah. And we have to mention too, Derek's the one that picked this film.
Yeah.
So good choice. I already gave my score. I said any movie with Winona Ryder, 8 out of 10. No, I honestly would probably give it about an 8 out of 10. Like, yeah, I really like this movie as well. Yeah, I mean, I've already kind of said everything I loved about it. I don't really know of any strong knocks about it. I think what it does very well. I give it 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I think I fall in the same range as you guys. I think like 7.5. I'll split the difference. Like it's a movie that like I'd watch. I think too like this is a movie that sometimes I always think of things like, oh, could you recommend this to somebody that's not like a horror genre fan? This movie I think you could. I think that you could recommend this to a pretty wide range of people. Just based on timing, I had to watch this by myself. But like if I had time, I was going to watch this with Julie because I thought she would have liked it, but didn't really
it
work out timing wise.
Female perspective on this film, especially too.
Yeah, but
just because this is based around kind of somewhat a part of it is the female experience in high school. So
yeah. Unfortunately, I did not get to watch it with Julie, and she couldn't be on the podcast this week because I can't just make her be on all the time.
Yeah,
but the movie, like I said, I think it's something you could recommend to a wide range of people, and it's something to like because I have friends that aren't huge horror fans who will listen to the podcast, and they'll watch some of the movies we talk about, stuff like that. Like I think this is one that you can watch if you're not a big horror fan, you can get something out of it, just because it does have like the dark comedy and some of the kind of absurdist stuff. So I think there's enough there to kind of hit a lot of different demographics.
Yeah, there's so many quotable lines from it too, and again, it is like. Derek, you talk about watching this a lot. Like, if Nicole said tomorrow she wanted to watch this movie again already, I'd be like, okay, I'll watch it again.
Well, too, this is
there's not a lot of films like that.
Like the line about like fuck me gently with the chainsaw, fuck me gently with the chainsaw. Like, so like there's a lot of stuff in the movie that's memorable, and like I think it's pretty easy to recommend to most people, even if somebody's like a hardcore horror fanatic who only likes to watch like slashers and stuff like that. Like this is a teen movie with a really dark edge, so there should be enough there to kind of keep the interest to some extent. So it's a movie I think is pretty easy to recommend. It's on Netflix, so you can go check it out. Something I'd recommend as well. So I think that wraps up our review of Heathers. And if you're listening via iTunes, you can do us a huge favor and go out and leave a review. That just helps other people find the podcast, and that helps us move up the podcast charts and let us know what's working, what's not. We always enjoy, too, seeing comments. If you're listening via YouTube, you get some great comments there. Like MJ Jones even recommended like a drinking game we could do based on our own podcast.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I forgot to kind of look out for some of those things. Oh, damn it. We could have got a drink, at least one shot I know of.
Because Derek mentioned X-Men.
Yeah. Derek, you there?
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody brought up drinking game rules. It involved every time you mention X-Men Apocalypse.
Or every time you don't like a movie, so he didn't like Alien, mention X-Men.
Every time you hate a new release.
Yeah, there was
there's like four things on there. And two, real quick, I said Winona Ryder. I was like, oh yeah, she maybe is not sometimes the most dramatic. I forgot Girl Interrupted. She's in that.
Yeah. Alien Resurrection.
But she's able to play. Yeah, I think she's stellar. So go subscribe on YouTube. Definitely, if you're watching Twin Peaks, that first 4 episodes thing, that was like a 50-minute video, so it's essentially like a podcast. It's video version though, but that's the first 4, and then we'll be putting out another one normally probably like a day or 2 or so, depending on when we, or actually probably at least 2 days, because once we're recorded, I gotta, I'll probably just slap that together, editing it real quick, since William handles the podcast editing and all that.
Yeah, so for the next one of those, I'll try to have some more research done before we get into it, because like I barely touch on the stuff that's in the Secret History of Twin Peaks book, just because I don't know how relevant that is to the show, because it's not like clear if that's official canon, if it's more of like a misdirect, or if that's what David Lynch believes, because it's written by Mark Frost. So who knows like how relevant that is to the end game of the show, but definitely adds interesting layers to that universe. But yeah, so check that.
And yeah, check our video discussion on the comments too, because there's some good discussion on there too. Some of it about like, oh, you guys got all this wrong, but granted, that's good, because there's some good stuff that you may have missed too that other people are kind of pointing out. I'm super excited for that next episode.
Yep. And then make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram and all those different platforms and YouTube, because we have a short film after the slasher we shot recently that I'll be finishing up soon. Then we'll see about submitting it to some festivals and things like that. And then depending on how that goes, we'll know when we're going to release it online. So we'll have that coming out. I think we have some more stuff we'll be working on. I know there's at least 1 or 2 more short projects we got in the pipeline. So make sure to keep an eye out for that. So we have new original stuff coming out as well. And yeah, so you can find all the stuff too at housebyvideostore.com. There's links there to everything. So you can find links to our social media, to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, or I think it's Instagram. You can find links there to everything. So make sure to follow us on all those platforms. If you want to follow,
don't forget Instagram.
I'll say it a 4th time. But then, yeah. And if you want to follow us specifically on the internet, you can find me on Twitter at Will_droid.
You can find me pretty much everything at MetaWorldDerek.
And I'm at Levin Sean on Twitter and at Sean2D2 on Instagram.
And that will bring this episode of the House by Video Store podcast to a close. Thanks for listening.